The twin sons of Kairos. 7 beat down relentlessly on the dunes, their searing heat rising in waves that made the horizon shimmer like molten glass. Max Arden wiped his brow as he tightened the straps on his sandcrawler, his rugged, wheeled vehicle designed to traverse the planet's harsh deserts. He had come to Kairos, 7 chasing rumors of a crashed cargo freighter, its hold supposedly brimming with valuable alloys and tech. But after 3 days of searching, the desert had yielded nothing but heat and frustration. Rex, find anything yet? Max called to his companion. Rex, a cybernetically enhanced dog with sleek fur embedded with sensor nodes, was sniffing around the rocky outcrops. The dog's modifications allowed him to detect traces of energy signatures, radiation, and even faint life signs. Rex paused, his ears perking up. A low growl rumbled in his throat before he barked sharply, his glowing eyes fixating on a narrow crevice between 2 jagged rocks. Max reached for his plasma rifle, his pulse quickening. He approached cautiously, his boots crunching on the gritty sand. "What is it, boy?" Max murmured, lowering his weapon slightly as he peered into the shadowed cleft. There, slumped against the rocks, was an alien figure. The creature's body was slender and covered in iridescent blue scales that glistened even in the dim light. A deep gash ran down its left leg, and a strange, purplish liquid, its blood, oozed from the wound. The alien opened its eyes, revealing pupils like slits, and hissed weakly. Max stiffened. He recognized the species instantly, a Uri. Humans and Uri had been at war for nearly a decade. The conflict had started over the mineral-rich moons of Ganymede, but over time it had devolved into brutal skirmishes across several star systems. The Uri were lethal fighters, known for their cunning and their strange ability to manipulate electromagnetic fields. "Damn it," Max muttered under his breath. His first instinct was to walk away, or worse, finish the alien off. But Rex didn't move. The dog stood protectively in front of the Uri, wagging his tail slightly and whining. "What's wrong with you, Rex?" Max asked, exasperated. "That's the enemy." Rex barked again, a sharp and insistent sound, then nudged the alien gently with his snout. The creature flinched but didn't lash out. Max sighed, lowering his rifle completely. "You've got to be kidding me." After much internal debate and a lot of whining from Rex, Max decided to help the alien. He wasn't sure if it was compassion or sheer curiosity that drove him, but he couldn't ignore Rex's uncharacteristic behavior. With great care, he hoisted the Uri onto his sandcrawler, binding its hands loosely with a length of synth rope just in case. The alien didn't resist, though its slitted eyes remained fixed on Max, radiating distrust. "What do I even call you?" Max muttered as he applied a basic medkit to the alien's wound. The alien hesitated before speaking in halting, accented English. "Karina." Max blinked, surprised that the Uri even knew his language. "All right, Karina. Don't make me regret this." Over the next few days, Max cared for Karina in his makeshift camp. She remained wary and distant, though she tolerated Rex's presence. The dog seemed to sense her pain, often lying near her as if to offer comfort. One evening, as the suns dipped below the horizon, Karina spoke. "Why?" she asked, her voice rasping. "Why do you help me, human?" Max shrugged, staring into the campfire. "I don't know. Maybe because my dog likes you. And maybe because I'm tired of all this killing." Karina's gaze softened, though she said nothing. The peace was shattered one night when Max's proximity alarms blared. He bolted upright, grabbing his rifle as Rex growled, his sensors glowing red. "What is it?" Max hissed, scanning the horizon. Karina, though still injured, sat up sharply. "Raiders," she said grimly. "I sense their energy." Before Max could question her, a volley of plasma bolts lit up the night, striking the sandcrawler. Max cursed, returning fire as shadowy figures emerged from the dunes. The raiders were humanoid but heavily augmented with cybernetics, their eyes glowing a sinister red. "We're outnumbered," Max shouted. Karina struggled to her feet, her wounds forgotten in the heat of the moment. "Release me," she demanded. "Are you insane?" Max shot back. "I can help." Karina snapped, her voice cutting through the chaos. Max hesitated only a moment before cutting the synth rope. Karina lunged forward, her hands crackling with blue energy. She unleashed a wave of electromagnetic force that sent several raiders flying. "Remind me never to get on your bad side," Max muttered, firing his rifle alongside her. Rex darted between the combatants, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to avoid the raiders' attacks. At one point, he leapt onto a raider's back, tearing into its circuits with his powerful jaws. Together, the trio managed to drive off the attackers, though the battle left them exhausted and their camp in ruins. In the aftermath, Max found himself looking at Karina in a new light. She wasn't just an enemy soldier. She was a survivor, just like him. "Guess we make a good team," Max said, offering her a rare smile. Karina inclined her head, a flicker of gratitude in her alien eyes. "Your dog, he is brave. Loyal." Max chuckled, scratching Rex behind the ears. "Yeah, he's one of a kind." Karina knelt beside Rex, running a scaled hand over his sleek fur. The dog wagged his tail, leaning into her touch. It was a simple moment, but it spoke volumes. For the first time, Max began to wonder if peace between their peoples was possible. If a human, a Uri, and a dog could work together, maybe there was hope after all. But the sands of Kairos, 7 held many secrets, and Max knew their journey was far from over. With their camp in ruins, Max decided it was time to move. The raiders might regroup, and staying in one place was a death sentence. He loaded what supplies remained onto the sandcrawler, its damaged frame creaking in protest. Karina, though still recovering, insisted on helping. Her knowledge of Kairos 7's terrain proved invaluable. Using her electromagnetic abilities, she detected traces of a power signature in the desert, possibly a remnant of the crashed freighter Max had been searching for. "Are you sure about this?" Max asked as they rolled across the dunes. Rex perched alertly on the dashboard. Karina nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "It is not far. The energy signal is faint but stable. It could be what you seek." The promise of valuable salvage spurred Max onward. As they crested a particularly high dune, they spotted it, a mangled, half-buried starship. Its hull shimmered faintly under the sunlight, its shape alien yet familiar. "That's no freighter," Max murmured, narrowing his eyes. Karina tensed. "It is a Uri warship." Max clenched his jaw. If the ship was operational, or worse, if it had survivors, it could spell trouble. The warship loomed larger as they approached. Its once sleek design was marred by jagged holes, scorch marks, and tangled wreckage. The sight sent a chill down Max's spine. Karina disembarked first, her movements cautious. She ran her hand over the hull, her expression unreadable. "This ship, it is from the early days of the war. A scout vessel. Any chance there's something dangerous inside?" Max asked, keeping his rifle ready. Karina didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned to Rex, who was sniffing the air and growling softly. "He senses something. We must be vigilant." Inside the wreck, the air was stifling and heavy with the scent of burnt metal. The corridors were narrow, their walls lined with dormant control panels. Karina led the way, her electromagnetic senses guiding them toward the ship's core. As they moved deeper, they found signs of a desperate struggle. Scorched bulkheads, claw marks on the walls, and the skeletal remains of Uri crew members. "What happened here?" Max asked, his voice hushed. Karina's jaw tightened. The humans must have ambushed this ship. They did not fight honorably in those days. Max frowned but held his tongue. The war had been brutal on both sides, and he doubted either species could claim the moral high ground. They finally reached the core chamber, a circular room dominated by a flickering energy field. In the center floated a glowing orb, a Uri memory core. Karina's breath caught. "This is it. The ship's intelligence. It holds everything. Maps, tactics, secrets." Max raised an eyebrow. "And you think it's still active?" Karina stepped closer, extending her hands toward the orb. As her fingers brushed the energy field, it flared brightly, causing Rex to bark in alarm. "Careful," Max warned. "I am fine," Karina said, her voice steady. But it is damaged. I may be able to extract fragments, but it will take time. The trio had barely begun their work when Rex's growls interrupted the silence. His sensors flared red, and he barked sharply, his gaze fixed on the entrance. Max cursed under his breath. We've got company. The raiders had returned, and this time, they were better prepared. From the ship's viewports, Max saw them deploying advanced weapons and hovercraft, their engines kicking up plumes of sand. Karina's hands trembled as she worked on the memory core. I need more time. You've got 5 minutes, Max said, checking his rifle. Rex, with me. As Max and Rex positioned themselves near the entrance, the first wave of raiders breached the ship. Plasma bolts lit up the corridor as Max fired back, using the narrow space to his advantage. Rex darted between the raiders, his cybernetic enhancements giving him an edge. He latched onto one attacker, tearing out a vital component from its exosuit before leaping to safety. Hold the line, Max shouted, reloading his weapon. Karina, meanwhile, worked frantically on the memory core. Sparks flew as she bypassed damaged circuits, her hands glowing with electromagnetic energy. She muttered something in her native tongue, her voice tinged with desperation. Finally, the orb pulsed brightly, and a holographic interface appeared. I have it, Karina cried. With the memory core secured, the trio made a hasty retreat. Max led the charge, blasting a path through the remaining raiders as Karina and Rex followed close behind. They barely reached the sandcrawler before the raiders overwhelmed the wreck. The vehicle roared to life as Max slammed the accelerator, the tires kicking up clouds of sand. Did you get anything useful? Max shouted over the engine's roar. Karina held up a small, glowing data crystal. This contains fragments of the ship's logs. It could reveal much about the war, about my people, perhaps even about yours. Max glanced at her, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Let's hope it was worth it. As the sandcrawlers sped into the desert, the wreck and the raiders faded into the distance. But Max couldn't shake the feeling that their troubles were far from over. Under the cool glow of Cairo's 7 twin moons, Max set up a temporary camp in a canyon shielded by towering rock spires. The raiders wouldn't find them here easily, not without specialized scanners. Karina sat cross-legged by the fire, the data crystal cradled in her hands. Its faint glow illuminated her scaled face, highlighting her exhaustion. Rex lay nearby, resting but keeping one eye on the surroundings. Max sat across from her, his plasma rifle within arm's reach. So, what's in the magic crystal? Karina glanced up, her eyes betraying a mix of trepidation and determination. If this crystal holds what I believe, it could change everything. Maps of contested territories, uncharted resources, even records of alliances my people forged in secret. Secret alliances? Max leaned forward, intrigued. With who? Karina hesitated. Some of your kind. Humans who believed the war was unnecessary. They provided aid to the Uri, information, supplies, even sanctuary. Max frowned. He'd heard rumors of traitors among human ranks, but they were dismissed as propaganda. If the crystal confirmed Karina's claim, it would rewrite the narrative of the war. Let's see what we're dealing with, Max said, gesturing to the crystal. Karina placed the crystal into a portable holographic reader salvaged from the sandcrawler. A beam of light projected upward, forming a three-dimensional interface. Uri script scrolled across the display, interspersed with schematics, maps, and fragmented video logs. Karina sifted through the data with practiced ease, her clawed fingers manipulating the holograms. One fragment caught her attention, a video log labeled First Contact. She hesitated. This is from the early days of exploration. Before the war. Play it, Max urged. The hologram shifted, displaying a scene of a lush, alien world. A group of Uri explorers stood in a clearing, their elegant forms blending with the foliage. Opposite them were humans, scientists and diplomats, their body language open and curious. This is incredible, Max whispered. The log showed the two groups exchanging technology and knowledge. The atmosphere was hopeful, almost celebratory. But the video abruptly cut to static, and the next segment was starkly different. Chaos. Explosions tore through the jungle as human and Yuri forces clashed violently. Karina's voice was barely audible. It wasn't always war. Max exhaled slowly. Something, or someone, turned us against each other. As they studied more of the crystal's contents, a chilling pattern began to emerge. Karina uncovered references to a clandestine organization known as the Shadow Syndicate, a faction that operated in the shadows of both human and Yuri societies. They manipulated events on both sides, Karina said, her voice shaking with anger. Supplying weapons, spreading false intelligence, sabotaging peace talks. Max's stomach churned. War profiteers. They didn't care who won, as long as the blood kept flowing. One file contained a grainy recording of a syndicate operative, their face obscured by a shifting mask. Their distorted voice spoke in cold, clinical tones. The war ensures progress. Resources harvested. Technologies perfected. Sacrifices justified. Max's grip on his rifle tightened. He'd seen firsthand the devastation caused by the war. Entire colonies reduced to rubble, families torn apart. And now he had a name for the faceless enemy pulling the strings. Karina met his gaze. If we expose this, it could end the war. It could also paint a target on our backs, Max said grimly. Their moment of revelation was cut short by the distant hum of engines. Rex's ears perked up, and he let out a low growl. Raiders? Max asked, already reaching for his rifle. Karina shook her head, her electromagnetic senses flaring. No, something more advanced. Max climbed to a vantage point and scanned the horizon through his binoculars. What he saw made his blood run cold. Sleek, black ships streaking toward them, their surfaces matte and unmarked. Syndicate hunters, Max muttered. Karina joined him, her expression grim. They must have tracked the crystal signal. We have to move now. Max didn't need convincing. He and Karina packed up the camp in record time, Rex already bounding toward the sandcrawler. The vehicle roared to life as Max gunned the accelerator, the canyon walls blurring past them. The syndicate ships closed in quickly, their weapons lighting up the night. Bolts of searing plasma struck the sandcrawler, rocking it violently. Hold on, Max shouted as he swerved to avoid another blast. Karina braced herself, her hands glowing as she directed electromagnetic pulses at the ships. One pulse connected, shorting out the lead ship's engines and sending it spiraling into the sand. That'll slow them down, she said, her voice strained. Not enough, Max replied, his knuckles white on the controls, desperate to escape. Max drove the sandcrawler into a massive sandstorm brewing on the horizon. The swirling winds and blinding sands offered some cover, but they also made navigation nearly impossible. This storm is suicidal, Karina shouted over the roaring wind. Got any better ideas? Max shot back. Rex barked, his sensors glowing. The dog pawed at the controls, guiding Max toward a faint energy signature. Rex has found something, Karina said, her voice cutting through the chaos. Max followed the dog's lead, steering the sandcrawler toward the signal. They emerged from the storm into a sheltered canyon. At its center stood a massive structure carved into the rock, a forgotten Yuri outpost, its surface etched with ancient symbols. Karina's eyes widened. This is a sanctuary, a place of refuge from the war. The sandcrawler rumbled to a halt, and the trio hurried inside as the syndicate ships circled above, unable to locate them through the storm. The outpost was eerily quiet, its halls dimly lit by flickering bioluminescent panels. Karina moved with reverence, tracing her fingers along the walls. This was a place of peace, she said softly, a reminder of who we were before the war. Max scanned the room, his curiosity piqued. Looks like it's been abandoned for a while. Think we're safe here? For now, Karina replied, but we should search for anything that can help us. As they explored, they discovered a central chamber filled with holographic archives. Among the files were records of early Yuri diplomacy, details of the syndicate's interference, and even prototypes of advanced Yuri technology. One prototype caught Max's attention, a device capable of disrupting electromagnetic signals across vast distances, a weapon that could disable the syndicate's fleet. Karina studied it closely. If we can get this operational, we might stand a chance. Max, Karina, and Rex worked tirelessly to bring the HFY prototype to life. The device, a sleek cylindrical construct with intricate etchings and an internal core of pulsing energy, was incomplete. Pieces of its machinery lay scattered in crates around the outpost. "This thing better be worth the effort," Max muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "It is," Karina assured him, her hands glowing faintly as she delicately aligned the device's circuits. "If this works, we can disable their fleet long enough to escape, or strike back." Rex nosed through a pile of discarded components, sniffing out parts they needed. His sensors beeped, and he barked to signal another find. "Good boy," Max said, giving him a quick pat before slotting the piece into the device. Hours turned into days as the trio worked in shifts, scavenging from the outpost reserves and repurposing damaged components. Karina's knowledge of HFY technology was indispensable, but even she grew frustrated at times. "This design is ancient," she muttered. "Powerful, but fragile. It was built for a world that no longer exists." Max glanced at her. "Sounds like it wasn't just the tech that changed." Karina didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked at the glowing device, her expression distant. "We lost more than the war took from us. My people, we were once explorers, builders. The war turned us into something unrecognizable." Max softened. "You're still here, still fighting for something better. That counts for a lot." For a moment, the tension between them eased, replaced by a mutual understanding. Their progress was interrupted when the outpost's sensors flared to life. Alarms blared as holographic displays lit up, showing syndicate ships circling the storm's edge. "They found us," Max said, grabbing his rifle. Karina checked the prototype's power levels. "It's not ready yet. We need more time." "Then we hold them off," Max said, determination hardening his voice. The outpost's ancient defenses, long dormant, sputtered to life. Energy cannons emerged from hidden panels, firing sporadic bursts at the syndicate ships. It wasn't enough to stop them, but it slowed their advance. Max and Karina fortified the entrances, setting up makeshift barricades. Rex patrolled the perimeter, his sensors on high alert. When the syndicate finally breached the outer doors, the battle began in earnest. Syndicate soldiers poured into the outpost, their armor sleek and advanced, their weapons eerily silent as they fired deadly plasma bolts. Max held his ground, his plasma rifle humming with each shot. Karina used her electromagnetic abilities to disable their weapons, her movements graceful but fierce. Rex moved like a blur, his enhanced reflexes giving him the upper hand against the invaders. Despite their efforts, the syndicate's numbers were overwhelming. They pushed deeper into the outpost, forcing Max and Karina to fall back to the central chamber. "We can't keep this up," Max said, reloading his rifle. "The prototype is almost ready," Karina replied, her voice strained. "But we need a distraction to power it fully." Max nodded, his mind racing. "I'll buy you time. Rex, stay with her." Rex whined but obeyed, standing protectively by Karina as Max charged into the fray. Max's diversion worked, drawing the syndicate forces away from the central chamber. He used the outpost's maze-like corridors to his advantage, setting traps and ambushes to thin their ranks. Meanwhile, Karina made the final adjustments to the prototype. The device began to hum, its energy levels climbing steadily. "Just a little more," she whispered, her hands glowing as she funneled her own energy into the core. Rex barked, his sensors flaring. Karina turned to see a squad of syndicate soldiers breaching the chamber. She raised her hands, unleashing a wave of electromagnetic force that shorted their weapons and sent them sprawling. But one soldier managed to fire a shot before falling, the plasma bolt grazing Karina's side. She cried out, clutching her wound, but didn't stop working. The prototype's hum grew louder, its core glowing brighter. Rex stood guard, his growls deterring any further advances. Finally, the device emitted a sharp, piercing tone. The air around it shimmered as an electromagnetic pulse rippled outward, disrupting every active system within its radius. The pulse knocked out the syndicate's ships, causing them to crash into the desert like falling stars. The soldiers inside the outpost collapsed as their suits and weapons failed, leaving them defenseless. Max returned to the central chamber, his face streaked with sweat and grime. "You did it." Karina nodded weakly, her scales pale from blood loss. "The prototype, it worked, but its power is spent." Max hurried to her side, helping her to her feet. "We'll get out of here. Find a way to finish this fight." Rex wagged his tail, nudging Karina's hand as if to reassure her. As they left the outpost, Max couldn't help but glance at the fallen syndicate soldiers. He knew they were only pawns in a larger game, one orchestrated by unseen hands. "We're not done yet," he said, determination burning in his eyes. "The syndicate's going to pay for what they've done." Karina met his gaze. "Together, we will make them answer." With the storm fading and the syndicate in disarray, the trio set out into the desert once more, carrying the data crystal and the promise of hope toward an uncertain future. The trio's journey across the desert led them to a hidden human colony tucked within the mountainous region of Kairos, 7. The settlement was small but equipped with advanced tech, a last bastion for those who sought refuge from the war. Max had heard rumors of the place during his years as a trader, but seeing it in person filled him with a flicker of hope. The colony's leader, a former military strategist named Captain Elias Drake, listened intently as Max and Karina recounted their findings about the syndicate. When Karina produced the data crystal, Drake's grim expression hardened. "This confirms what we've suspected for years," Drake said. "The syndicate has been profiting from this war, stoking hatred between our species. If we can get this information to the right people, we might stand a chance of ending the conflict." "But that's a big if," Max replied. "The syndicate isn't going to let us walk away from this." Drake nodded. "Which is why we'll need a coordinated strike. Their main communications hub is on this planet, hidden in the southern dunes. If we destroy it, we can cripple their operations and broadcast the truth to every corner of the galaxy." The colony's forces were small but determined. Max, Karina, and Rex joined them in a daring plan to infiltrate the syndicate hub. Using salvaged hovercrafts and stolen syndicate uniforms, they navigated through the treacherous desert, avoiding patrols and automated defenses. Karina, now fully healed, took the lead in disabling the syndicate security systems. Her electromagnetic abilities allowed them to bypass locked doors and disrupt surveillance drones. Rex, ever vigilant, scouted ahead, alerting the group to hidden traps and enemy movements. As they reached the heart of the facility, they encountered fierce resistance. Syndicate soldiers poured into the corridors, their advanced weaponry cutting through the air. Max and the colony fighters held the line while Karina worked to plant charges on the main data servers. "Almost there," Karina shouted over the din of battle. "Hurry up," Max yelled back, firing his rifle at an advancing soldier. Rex leapt onto an enemy, tearing through their armor and disarming them before darting back to Max's side. Finally, Karina signaled that the charges were set. The team fell back, retreating to their hovercrafts as explosions rocked the facility. The syndicate hub erupted in flames, its towering antennae collapsing in a cascade of sparks. With the syndicate hub destroyed, the colony used the stolen data to transmit the truth across the galaxy. Footage of the syndicate's machinations, including their orchestration of the war, flooded communication networks. For the first time, both humans and Uri saw the shadowy forces that had manipulated them for years. The fallout was immediate. Frontline skirmishes ceased as soldiers on both sides questioned their orders. Leaders from both species called for an emergency ceasefire to investigate the syndicate's actions. Karina watched the broadcasts with a mixture of relief and sadness. "It's a start," she said softly. Max stood beside her, his hand resting on Rex's head. "We've given them a chance. Now it's up to them to do the right thing." Months later, Max, Karina, and Rex found themselves back on Kairos, 7, now a neutral meeting ground for peace talks between humans and Uri. The colony had grown into a hub of cooperation, its people working together to rebuild what the war had destroyed. Karina was invited to join the Uri delegation, her efforts hailed as a symbol of hope for her people. Max, ever the pragmatist, opted to return to trading, but not before ensuring Rex received a much-deserved upgrade to his cybernetics. As they stood on a ridge overlooking the desert, Karina turned to Max. Will you ever stop wondering? Max chuckled. Not likely. But if you ever need someone to watch your back, you know where to find me. Karina smiled, a rare gesture that softened her alien features. I'll hold you to that, human. Rex barked in agreement, wagging his tail. The sons of Kairos, 7 set behind them, painting the horizon in hues of gold and crimson. The war was over, but their journey was far from finished. Together, they had forged a bond that transcended species, proving that even in the darkest times, unity and trust could light the way forward. And somewhere, in the shadows of the galaxy, the remnants of the syndicate watched, biding their time. For now, though, the trio had earned their peace and the promise of a brighter future.